Joining me now to discuss Democratic Congressman Jake Auchincloss, who himself has visited Ukraine. Congressman, thanks for taking the time this afternoon.
Good to be back on, Jim.
You and I have talked about this a number of times over recent weeks. I know the urgency with which you view this aid to Ukraine, as do many of your colleagues. Fact is, Ukraine aid is still stalled in Congress. And when I speak to some lawmakers on the Hill, their attitude has changed in recent weeks. They're beginning to raise the prospect, even resignation, to Ukraine aid not happening at all due to Republican opposition. And I wonder if you share that concern.
The sense of urgency you described, Jim, and my refusal to give in to that nihilism is why I'm voting against tonight's continuing resolution to fund the government for a short term, because I'm not going to bail the Republicans out of their continuing dysfunction unless they present a clear, credible, and concrete plan to fund our ally. Unfortunately, Ukraine is getting ensnared in U.S. domestic politics, particularly Trump and his campaign. But a majority of members of Congress still see that this is good policy. And it's good policy, one, because appeasement doesn't work. It didn't work the last time there was a murderous dictator on the rampage in Europe. It won't work this time. Number two, because the money that we are spending on Ukraine is actually mostly being invested in the U.S. industrial complex. We are creating American jobs. We are helping the U.S. munitions complex prepare for 21st century conflict. And then finally, Jim, and you and I have talked about this before, this is sending a message to allies. I was meeting with the Taiwanese ambassador this morning, and he indicated that the Chinese in the recent Taiwanese election were pumping in disinformation to Taiwanese voters about U.S. being a fair weather friend. And we can fight that with words, but ultimately actions speak louder than words.
Powerful, and it's a point that you hear in Russian information operations as well. I do want to get to Taiwan. On the question of Ukraine aid, yesterday President Biden met with congressional leaders. He said it would be a disaster if that aid got held up indefinitely. Do you think he moved the needle at all with that meeting?
It's 4 versus 1. President Biden, Senator Schumer, Senator McConnell, Leader Jeffries, all of them agree, Democrat and Republican, that supporting Ukraine is an important investment in the rules-based international order and good security policy for the United States. It's just Speaker Johnson. He's on an island, and he's been telling people that he's talking to Donald Trump almost every day. The question is he going to listen to Donald Trump, or is he going to do what's right for America? And only Speaker Johnson will be able to answer that question.
So let me ask you about that, because Donald Trump has a very different view of this war. He has claimed, without apparent basis or argument, that he would somehow end the war on the first day. The U.S. intelligence assesses that Putin is waiting out the U.S. election because he sees that a Trump administration would be more friendly to his aims, frankly, in Ukraine and elsewhere. Do you believe that Trump's influence on the House might stand in the way not just of aid to Ukraine, but also a deal on immigration, that Trump might calculate that no progress on the border would serve his interests in November?
Donald Trump is an individual who claimed that he could have negotiated the prevention of the Civil War, whereas in actuality, he was out-negotiated by Kim Jong-un in North Korea. So his negotiation skills should be highly suspect. He's a charlatan. But unfortunately, the majority of the House Republican Conference is afraid of a primary challenge that Trump would endorse against them. And so they are highly solicitous of his opinion on this subject. He clearly does not want to govern on the border. He wants to campaign on the border. And I'm told by a number of Republican colleagues that Speaker Johnson yesterday in the Republican conference said, if you're here to campaign on immigration, shame on you. We have an obligation to govern on it instead. That's one thing to say behind closed doors. Let's see if he actually acts that way when the bill comes out of the Senate.
I mean, that's my question. Do you believe the House would defy Trump, in effect, and pass a deal that comes over from the other chamber?
The deal is not yet drafted, so it's hard to consider hypotheticals. But in a situation where a bill passed the Senate with more than 60 votes, I do believe that the math could work in the House, but ultimately it requires political courage from Speaker Johnson.
And political courage, as you know better than me, has been in short supply on the Hill at times. I do want to ask about Taiwan now, because, of course, you had an election this weekend in which Taiwanese voters, in an unprecedented style, returned to office, the Democratic People's Party. which is the most pro-democratic party. It no longer stands for independence. That said, its president-elect has in the past stood for that. What is your sense of how China views this election? Are you concerned that they will react threateningly to the choice of Taiwanese voters?
China is clearly disappointed with the outcome. It's not what they wanted. They wanted the KMT to get into power and to have closer cross-strait relations, particularly with the business communities. But I think the Chinese Communist Party needs to reflect on the fact that their disinformation campaigns actually boomeranged on them.
Yeah.
They tried to use TikTok and YouTube and other formats to undermine the integrity of the Taiwanese electoral process. And in fact, voters moved away and had an adverse reaction to that, which to me is one of the big takeaways from this election, regardless of whether it was DPP or KMT who won. It is a reflection upon the health of the Taiwanese democracy overall. 50 years ago, Taiwan was not a democracy. And with the support of countries like the United States, it has evolved into a vibrant one. It puts the lie to the Chinese Communist Party's claim that the Han people and Confucian cultures don't comport well with democracy. That's clearly not true when you see what Taiwan has built. And that is a systemic threat to the CCP's legitimacy on the mainland. And I think American policymakers in both parties do need to help Taiwan prepare for increasingly belligerent actions.
Yeah, you'd think China might learn, because there was a similar failure with Australia, right? A lot of pressure, political interference, and Australia went the other way.
Europe as well.
So Lai, he's been careful about his position on independence. He noted his party has historically argued for it, but also that the decision would come from the entire electorate. In other words, kind of making the big tent argument here, right? Saying we're not going to sort of state a position either way. Does that successfully thread the needle? Because the administration says this often, as do military officials, that arguably China's red line for a potential military action would be a declaration of independence.
The median voter in Taiwan wants to maintain the status quo. They don't want unification. They also don't want outright independence. They want to maintain the status quo. And keep an eye on the Legislative Yuan, the Taiwanese Congress, in this upcoming session. DPP does not have a majority there. In fact, no party does. KMT, DMT, DPP, both have large cohorts, but the TPP, which is sort of the swing party, has a small kingmaker faction. And it's going to be a lot about the relationship, I think, between TPP and the new president about how they thread that needle.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of magic or difficulty of coalition government, right? And we'll see it play out there. Congressman Jake Auchincloss, always good to have you on. Thanks so much.
Take care.